When the world was at war, survival didn't depend on fancy gear, titanium tents, or high-tech insulation. It depended on knowledge, grit, and the mastery of terrain. Soldiers on the front lines of World War II learned this lesson fast, especially those stuck in the brutal winters of Europe and the Eastern Front. Temperatures dropped well below freezing, winds tore through thin uniforms, and shelter meant the difference between life and death. What most people don't realize is that many of these men weren't just hiding in trenches. They were building some of the most efficient underground survival shelters ever designed, structures that modern preppers and outdoorsmen could learn a lot from today. The key to survival was going below the frost line. Above-ground shelters lost heat fast. Even with fire, heat escaped into the cold night air, leaving men to shiver until dawn. World War II engineers and infantrymen discovered that by going below ground just a few feet, they could use the earth itself as insulation. Soil retains warmth, keeping temperatures around 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, even when the air outside plunges below zero. The principle was simple but powerful. The earth became a thermal blanket, holding onto the heat that human bodies and small fires produced. The design started with a narrow trench, usually about 2 to 3 feet wide and 6 feet deep enough to stand or crouch inside. Soldiers dug it into a slope whenever possible, allowing rain and snow to drain away naturally. They would then carve out a wider chamber from the side of that trench, just large enough for 2 to 4 men to lie down. The entrance was kept low to prevent wind from cutting through, and the roof was covered with wooden planks, sticks, or even discarded doors before being sealed with a thick layer of dirt. Inside, the air stayed still, the temperature stabilized, and men could finally rest without their breath turning to frost on their lips. These trench shelters were often referred to as dugouts, and they demonstrated a profound understanding of natural insulation. In the absence of fiberglass or foam, soldiers used what they had: layers of straw, evergreen branches, or even grass stuffed between the planks to trap air. Air is the best natural insulator, and this principle remains as true today as it was in 1943. To prevent suffocation or smoke buildup, they cut a small ventilation shaft near the entrance, or poked holes through the roof using hollow reeds or pipe sections. One hole near the top acted as an exhaust for smoke, while a lower one near the entrance pulled in fresh air. This created a crude but functional airflow system. In cold climates, this design allowed a small fire, often just a can stove or heated stones, to provide hours of warmth without drawing attention or using much fuel. Anyone trying this method today could adapt it using modern materials. A small trench dug into a slope or hill, a wooden frame covered with a tarp, and soil layered on top. By insulating the walls with dry grass or a sleeping mat and venting through a narrow pipe, you can, replicate a WWII. Key-style dugout, capable of maintaining livable temperatures even in sub-zero weather. WWII soldiers were masters of efficiency. Every inch of the dugout had a purpose. Sleeping areas were raised a few inches off the ground, using wooden boards or packed earth to avoid the damp cold. Weapons and rations were stored near the entrance for quick access, while the warmest spot, near the small fire or heat source was reserved for whoever had guard duty that night. The layout also minimized light exposure. A dim fire placed behind an earthen wall gave warmth without exposing the shelter to enemy eyes. Even in non-combat conditions, this setup shows how well-designed underground shelters can balance safety, warmth, and concealment. For today's survivalists or homesteaders, adapting this principle means thinking spatially. A small underground sleeping chamber connected to a narrow entrance passage traps heat inside and reduces the risk of exposure. The less space there is to heat, the longer warmth lasts. Modern builders can use sandbags, logs, or even corrugated metal roofing as structural supports before covering them with soil. The Eastern Front is honestly one of history's harshest testing grounds for human endurance. German and Soviet troops learned pretty quickly that comfort, well, it meant survival. The Soviets especially perfected the art of earthen shelters known as zemlyankas. These were not mere holes, they were cleverly engineered, often lined with logs, fitted with stoves made from tin or scrap metal, and insulated with snow piled thickly around the exterior. Many of these shelters stayed habitable throughout entire winters, even when surface tents froze solid. Modern application of this knowledge can be honestly incredibly practical for anyone living in cold regions or off-grid settings. Building a small semi-subterranean storm shelter or bug-out bunker, based on the Zemlyanka model, can really drastically reduce heating costs and increase energy efficiency. Even in a backyard, such a design can serve as an emergency shelter root cellar or storage space that, well, remains naturally climate-controlled year-round. The reason these trench shelters remain relevant isn't nostalgia, it's physics and survival logic. When modern survivalists build above-ground shelters, they lose up to 60% of their generated heat to air convection and wind. The World War II soldiers already solved this problem by going underground, using passive heat retention to, quite simply, stay alive. For anyone serious about preparedness, cold weather camping, or historical survival techniques, this old design offers both simplicity and reliability. There's no need for generators or advanced tools, just a bit of understanding of the natural laws of heat and earth. A few hours of digging, a layer of insulation, and an efficient layout can honestly turn a freezing night into a bearable one. Every time we study how soldiers survived in the worst conditions of World War II, we uncover principles that, frankly, modern society has forgotten. The trench shelter design wasn't just born of desperation. It was refined through necessity, endurance, and ingenuity. In an era where people rely on synthetic gear, electric heat, and prefab shelters, revisiting these designs brings us closer to the essence of true survival adaptation and respect for nature's laws. If you value the kind of forgotten knowledge that once kept soldiers alive in the dead of winter, don't let it fade again. Share this video, keep the history alive, and subscribe to In the Beginning for more insights into the survival engineering that shaped the past and could one day save you in the future.